Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's video, we're talking about passwordless technology and the role of identity in cybersecurity. We'll discuss how hackers are using AI, and we'll take a look at the future of cybersecurity. To discuss that, I'm joined by one of the true leaders in the cybersecurity field. With me is Rohit Ghai, Chief Executive Officer at RSA. Rohit, absolutely thrilled to have you with us today.
Great to be with you, James. Always fun having a conversation
All
about
right, great.
cybersecurity.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, one thing that concerns me about the cybersecurity industry is that identity threats are on the rise. I mean, I know it's not new, but it's certainly prevalent. So, why are identity threats on the rise? Is the cybersecurity industry somehow failing as a whole? I mean, what's going on here?
No, I think fair question. Let me say that. And what I would say is, look, we are living in a recessionary climate, James, as you know, and it's a time of much geopolitical volatility as well.
Indeed.
So, it is in times like this, it is typical for cyber threats as well as identity-related cyber threats to be on the rise. And the reason is pretty obvious. The threat actor, the hacker, is a pretty rational actor. And as such, the threat actor is looking to take advantage of the situation, if you will. They know budgets are under pressure, security teams are distracted, perhaps understaffed, going through personnel changes. And in addition, relative to the geopolitical side, nation-state threat actors are very active during times like this. So it's not a surprise to me that threat activity is on the rise. The other thing I would say is, recently the Verizon data breach incident report came out, and that also shined the light on the threat landscape and what's happening there, et cetera. So, look, yes, threat activity is on the rise, but it's a sign of the backdrop, if you will. It is not a statement or not a verdict on whether the cybersecurity industry is making progress or not, which I believe we do. We are making progress.
Well, maybe it would help if we step back and looked at a larger picture. I mean, what are the key trends in identity security these days? What are the macro trends?
Yeah. No, look, let's start with the good news. The good news is identity security is now finally getting its due importance in the cybersecurity sector. And if I were to pick the top three power plays, I call them, for identity for 2025, they would be the following. And It's pretty easy to remember. It's the three Ps, the three power plays of identity. The first being passwordless, the second being posture management, and the third is platformization. Those, I think, are the key trends, the key, I think, levers to consider if you are in the profession of securing identity. And, the case for each of those is pretty straightforward. Passwordless, we know passwords are clunky, they're costly, and they're categorically insecure. So getting rid of passwords, definitely good for cybersecurity. It's not easy, but it's a very, very beneficial thing to do. Posture management, the case for it is, as the Verizon data breach incident report said, identity is how the bad guys are getting in the door. Identity is the kind of the, as they call, the initial access vector, to use the cybersecurity term.
Right.
And if that is the case, and if it is indeed the most attacked part of the attack surface, the best way to improve your cybersecurity posture is to improve your identity security posture. So posture management focused on identity is sort of the area number two. And third, platformization. Look, we have tolerated a fragmented mishmash of tools in the world of identity, but these siloed tools that do not share data or context can simply not keep up with the velocity of AI-powered cyber threats. So as such, these three are the imperatives on the cybersecurity agenda from an identity lens.
Interesting. So I want to talk about passwordless, but I think the platform question is also key in that is the idea there, or the issue there, that some companies are trying to assemble best of breed from like 20 different vendors, and they've done that, and suddenly the solutions don't talk to each other? What's going on with platformization?
Yeah. Look, I think there is precisely what you said. There is there is a propensity in the cybersecurity industry to have a best of breed buying behavior. And that served us well when the attackers were fragmented on their end as well. And they were like trying to kind of, take these pointed, targeted approach to getting through the door. But the threat actor is much more sophisticated now. They're taking a holistic approach. They're using social engineering. They're using AI. They're using prowess in programming and coding. Every tool that is at their disposal, they're leveraging, and they're launching these holistic, nefarious attacks. And as such, they're taking advantage of the schism between these different siloed tools. Mm-hmm. And give you a perfect example, right? In the world of identity, we obsess about authentication. Oh, your authentication must be secure. You must use multiple factors and this and that. But just last week, we were reminded that attackers don't get in by compromising your authentication. When they can't beat it, they bypass it. Mm-hmm. And the example I'm citing is the Mark and Spencer breach, which, much like the MGM breach a couple of years ago, the threat actors basically called the help desk line and convinced the help desk technician that they were legitimate users by impersonating users, mm-hmm. and asked them to change their passwords. Mm. These users were using very sophisticated, very robust multi-factor authentication tools, but they got compromised through social engineering techniques. Mm-hmm. And so its identity got attacked at a different point in its identity's lifecycle. Mm. So if the MFA solution were to talk to the identity and IGA solution, the identity and governance solution, this attack could have been avoided. And that's a perfect example of how siloed solutions get in the way of assuring cybersecurity, and hackers are clearly taking advantage. These are hundreds of millions of dollars that, in the Mark and Spencer case and in the MGM case, were the sort of the damage from a financial perspective.
Yeah. Wow. Well, all right, that's the platform issue. When you and I last spoke, we discussed the role of passwordless technology. I mean, there is resistance to it, yet I think it's gaining adoption. I read a recent analyst projection forecast that said that 50% of workforce transactions would be passwordless this year. Might be a little high. I mean, you can't believe everything you read on the internet, but is passwordless ready for the enterprise?
Yeah. Let me start by saying the enterprise is ready to receive passwordless.
Okay, that is your answer. All right.
But the but in the statement is not all passwordless solutions are ready for the enterprise.
Aha. Okay, they're not all created.
So it behooves me to unpack what I mean by enterprise ready from a passwordless perspective. Mm-hmm. Right? And there are three traits that come to mind. One is the breadth of coverage, comprehensive coverage. And by this, I mean, passwordless is not the same as less passwords. If you, James, had 20 applications that you need to log into, and if you don't use passwords for 15, that's great. But as long as you still have to use passwords for the 5, it's not passwordless.
Right.
You need a solution that covers the entirety of your IT estate, all applications, legacy, new, on-prem, off-prem, on the edge, and everything in between. So comprehensive coverage is number one. Number two is passwords. Yes, passwords could be stolen, but even passkeys or passwordless approaches are vulnerable to the same help desk type attacks. Mm-hmm. So yes, passwordless is about authentication, but unless your governance solution, unless your end-to-end management of lifecycle can deal with passwordless solutions, you are very vulnerable. You are kind of, it can actually introduce additional risk in an environment instead of making better. So caring about end-to-end governance of passwordless credentials is number two. Mm-hmm. And number three is there is all this rage about phishing resistance. Yes, for good reason. But you need to provide not just phishing resistance, but malware resistance, outage resistance, quantum resistance, AI resistance. You need to protect yourself against every possible attack that can come through. So your passwordless solution stack needs to live up to that bar. So, we, RSA, at the conference announced what we believe is the only enterprise-ready passwordless solution stack. On the consumer side, there is a lot of solutions, but in the enterprise, we think it's a pretty short list as of now in terms of who can provide this enterprise-worthy passwordless approach.
Well, let's talk about that a bit. What is it that distinguishes the RSA solution? Is there a feature here or there that you really want to point to that makes all the difference?
Yeah. There are two things I would point out. Number one is, the comprehensive nature of coverage. So we don't offer just passkeys. People have synonymized passwordless to passkeys. And you as a user of, your Gmail or your Outlook email provider is nagging you these days to say, hey, James, would you like to, use passkeys and never have to use passwords?
Right.
Yes, people are associating passkeys with passwordless, but the reality is not all applications support passkeys. And as such, you need multiple strategies like QR codes, like one-time passwords, like biometrics, to cover the entire gamut of all applications and eradicate passwords from every workflow, every application, and every device.
Okay.
While protecting your estate from every attack. So that's point number one, right? We cover it all. We have this comprehensive coverage. The second thing, back to the MGM and the Mark and Spencer help desk attack example, we also announced something called Help Desk Live Verify solution that can assure that workflow that if a help desk receives a call from an employee saying, look, I've lost my credentials,
right,
forgotten my password, or lost my passkey, what is the sequence of steps that needs to be done to securely restore credentials? And by the way, they should make sure that the person on the other end is first a human and not an AI masquerading as a human. And number two, it's the right human, right? Not a threat actor impersonating an employee.
Right.
So that liveness verification and that assurance during a credential restore process is a hard problem to solve. And we were excited to announce Help Desk Live verification as part of our suite of passwordless security capability that we introduced to the market.
All right, interesting. So, let's talk about AI. I mean, there's as you've mentioned, there's good news and bad news about AI, and I know you don't see AI as a cure-all, but how are hackers using AI to launch new types of attacks these days? You just mentioned the AI bot. What else is going on in that area?
No, great. Look, I think AI, like you noted, is a double-edged sword, right? And it's being used very in a very clever way by the threat actors. And I'd like to talk about kind of the journey, right, of automation that the threat actors have used. Right?
Okay.
Automation has been around both on the good side and the bad side of cyber for decades.
Sure.
On the bad side, they started with using scripts and automation to automate attacks, like a password spray attack, for example, right? You would do a brute force, dictionary-based guess the password attack as an example.
Right.
So that was just brute force automation. The next phase, which occurred over the last, call it 3 to 5 years, was the use of AI-generated deepfakes and the impersonation type of attacks, where I could use AI to masquerade as a legitimate user and thereby steal their credentials as a way to get in the door, right? And
is that actually a voice generated AI? I mean, just to be clear on that.
Absolutely. I think there's the most common use is actually an AI generated voice that mimics another individual's voice to conduct fraud, right?
Amazing.
Or steal credentials. So as an example, even in the help desk scenario, it could actually be an AI generated voice that is speaking in the voice of an employee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my.
that's sort of phase two. But there is a phase three that is happening right about now. And that one is, this idea of using what I call agentic adversarial AI. That
Hmm.
means using not just AI not just for automation, not just for impersonation, but for intelligence. And what do I mean by that?
Hmm.
If I contrast the brute force passwordless guessing attack from a decade ago, that was a dictionary based dumb attack.
Hmm.
I was going through all combinations of letters and numbers.
Right.
Now the AI attacker, what it would do, this new agent, what it would do is it would research your social media accounts. It would research your digital shadow on the internet to find out key information about you, where you live, where you have lived, your kids, your
Right.
pets, et
Right.
cetera, and then use that to make an intelligent attack, very targeted and intelligent attack as opposed to a dumb brute force attack.
Right.
It's just an example of how, so it's gone from brute force automation to impersonation to this very intelligent and targeted agentic attack. That's how the AI kind of, based threat vector has evolved right in front of our eyes.
That is amazing. I mean, it's terrible and horrifying, but it's also an amazing use of technology. It's kind of fascinating in a really sort of unfortunate way. All right, well, that brings us to a very, what is going on in the future? What do you see looking ahead? We've seen some amazing developments, the journey of AI, et cetera, passwordless technology. If you look ahead to the next few years, look into your crystal ball, what developments do you see in the cybersecurity industry in the next, say, 3 to 5 years or so?
Fantastic. No, look, as much as AI is a force for the bad guys, I'm extremely excited about what AI brings to the table for us cyber defenders. And the reason is one of the problems that has plagued us for decades is we just don't have enough good humans to fight the good fight.
Hmm.
As such, the challenge is not that we are not doing our jobs in a good way. It's just that we are not able to get to all of the workload, right? A typical statistic is only 50% of the alerts are being looked at. We are always behind in terms of patching and applying the security updates to our solutions so they are kind of current and
Hmm.
not vulnerable.
Hmm.
So our workload exceeds our working capacity. And as such, by deploying AI, it's not a very sophisticated use of AI, but it's a very powerful use of AI to help us cover the gap between our capacity and our workloads. So all this grunt work that never gets done, but is so impactful for cybersecurity, like timely patching, like taking a look at all the alert signals, that is area number one where cybersecurity will have a huge impact. Filling the talent gap. When you don't have enough humans, you recruit robots. That's sort of the scenario, right? Scenario number one.
Hmm.
Scenario number two is that cybersecurity is a very complex problem. Bad guys are often already inside, right? And they're lurking and dwelling, as the cybersecurity term states, and then they find the right opportunity to attack. So what we have, what is a very hard problem is to discern and detect signals from the noise in terms of finding out like when the threat actor got in and how they're lurking and hiding. So doing a better job of detecting the signal from the noise is area number two. That's just getting better at our detection and response, right? That's area number two. And area three, which is near and dear to my heart, in the world of identity. In the world of identity, back to that posture management piece, right? Where there is, the threat actors are utilizing our underused credentials. A typical user only uses 20% of their privilege or entitlement. So the rest of the 80% that I never use that I have is actually, what the attackers exploit to get in.
What do you mean by that, the 20%, 80%? In what sense?
Yeah. So let's say you are an employee for a corporation, James, and when you join the company, they give you rights and privilege to access a bunch of different applications.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, in your typical day, you're only using a small subset of those entitlements. You're only accessing, typically at 20% of the entitlements that you've been granted.
Right. Okay, I get it.
So you're
Right.
never logging into those 80%. And what the attackers do is they actually find that out, and that's how they get in, right?
Ah.
And so unused or underused entitlements is a source for much much vulnerability. And so closing that gap by using AI to detect those scenarios and do just-in-time provisioning. So when you need to access an application, I'll grant you that privilege just then, and then revoke it right after you use it, instead of having a sort of a, it's sort of a just-in-time strategy versus always open door strategy, which we
Yes.
can actually implement because now we have AI and automation that can actually make that happen. So AI-powered posture management is sort of another future, possibility that I see, and we've started to make inroads. It's early days in that journey, but it's a very, very exciting space and very, very exciting opportunity for us cyber defenders.
Amazing. Rohit, I think you said it. It's a lot of really interesting material. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for sharing expertise, and please come back and talk with us again sometime.
I would love to, and thank you for the time, James.